To me, it seems like the jig is up for the West in terms of color revolutions. We've done it so much, and like you said, we've been using the same playbook. We saw this in Belarus not too long ago as well, an attempted color revolution. Can you kind of explain just the process of how the United States foments color revolutions?
Okay,
How
well,
they go about it?
yeah, well, part of it is the establishment of many NGOs. And I heard this figure just the other day that there are 20,000 NGOs in Georgia. That's hard to believe. If that indeed is true, then probably like every other Georgian, is employed by an NGO. But let's say even if it's off by an order of magnitude, like there's 2,000, that would be a huge number of NGOs for a country like Georgia. But you have these NGOs, and they set up classes, they educate people, and they hire them. This is the thing, is that they can hire young people for like $10 an hour or $20 an hour. It's just a huge sum. It's just like 10 times the amount of money they can make, at a regular job in Georgia or Ukraine or wherever, these NGOs are operating. So they become very loyal. They can win their loyalty. Maybe they haven't won their loyalty, but they got it. These guys know what side of the bread is buttered. So they will do their bidding. So when you say, "Hey, it's time to go out on the streets and protest," they'll go out. You can get easily turn out tens of thousands of them. They're all on the payroll of these NGOs. And then it's not just that they're kind of indoctrinated in Western thinking, and supporting the West, but they're taught certain tactics, how to coordinate these protests, and what kind of signs to make. And you often see the signs are in English. So it's really these governments really weren't paying attention. It's the ones that were in fact overthrown by these colored revolutions. But right there, a revolution was being prepared beneath their feet. And then when they would wait for, an election, and there might in fact be some irregularities, like in every country there are some, even in the U.S., as we know, there are irregularities. And they seize on that. And then instead of, just going through the regular procedures as you're supposed to, okay, we count the ballots again, we do this. They insist that, okay, the government that was elected is illegitimate and must step down, and they can create tremendous pressure. I mean, there's just pressure on the streets, and then at the same time, the Western governments are applying pressure from the top. And in many cases, these governments were overthrown. In fact, it did happen in Georgia. I think it was in the early 2000s. There was a Rose Revolution, I believe it was called. But eventually the Georgians worked their way. They ended up with Saakashvili and so on. But eventually the Georgians have started to establish their own independence. It was, it's interesting. The Georgian, including I think the Georgia Dream Party, tried to go down the path of EU integration. But it was just that the constant unreasonable demands by the Europeans began to really turn them off, and the constant meddling and whatever. And so now we're at this point now where there's really open hostility. It's just like the Georgians are sick of the EU, and
So what
there's
type of
constant meddling.
demands? What
Well, a lot of it, of course, is you have to be anti-Russian. You have to impose sanctions against Russia. That's a big part of it. And then you have to have, adopt our woke laws. It could be anything, a range of laws that make you kind of signify that you understand and adopt European values.
So who's funding all these NGOs? Is it, the National Endowment for Democracy? We heard that was a big player in Ukraine.
Right.
Is that what it, are there,
Is
it all government
Western
funding?
agencies, and Soros. So you also have private funding, from Western sources.
The whole Soros thing, we won't dive into, maybe we'll save that for later, but this whole global elite cabal, it seems to be real. So anyways, but most of these NGOs they're funded from people like Soros. Soros, but also
Probably
just
the
governments,
majority by
Western,
government agencies,
by
Western
government.
government
So
agencies.
these are taxpayer dollars, right?
Right.
So this is our money that is going into, these CIA cutouts like the National Endowment for Democracy,
Right.
and then they use this money to fund, pay all these young people in Georgia or wherever salaries, and to put their scales on news agencies, Western media, things like this, to pump it in and foment these revolutions. So that's basically how it's working, right? We're constantly using our taxpayer dollars to meddle into other democracies.
Right. And all the time screaming Russian interference. And the Russians are nowhere to be seen. The Russians are playing, a completely, benign and neutral role. Okay, yeah, Russians will trade you. The tourists will come and spend their money. Like in these protests, you don't see Russians out there, but you see all kinds of Europeans screaming about Russian interference. So who's interfering? Of course, it's the Europeans. And interestingly, there are a lot of Ukrainians there. In fact, the Russians warned that there was a sniper team being sent from Ukraine. Part of the Maidan Revolution was a false flag event committed by snipers at the Maidan Square. And so there's a warning that they may try to do something similar, and that the Ukrainian special forces had been sent there.
It seems like we built the U.S. and the collective West. We have our system of Western democracies, and it seems like we know how to game the democracies. We always talk about, we got to keep elections fair, but it seems like we understand how the game works, and we're able to put our fingers on the scales all around the world, on every other democracy in the world. It seems like we like democracies because we can manipulate them more easily.
Well, we like them when we get the results that we want. So if, the opposition parties had won, there would be no irregularities, and it would just be wonderful. It would be a great victory for democracy. But you don't understand. It's just sort of similar like within Western Europe, if National Rally wins, that's a blow to the democracy. So we, in the interest of democracy, we need to suppress them and, do whatever we can, play all these games. And that's what they do, right? So it's just, democracy has come to mean quite simply, Western hegemony.